Hello, I'm Christopher Crystal with Financial Stockholm, and today is Wednesday, November 16th, 2022. And these are our discussions about what we're seeing in the Swedish press and our reflections on it. So with that, I'll begin. The focus in Sweden is primarily on the events that's happened in Poland and the missiles that were apparently fired from the Ukrainian side. They were part of their missile defense system. And this comes after a wide barrage of missile attacks from Russia last week. But why the Ukrainian missile air defense would be firing into Poland, especially if there were no missiles from the Russian side that hit into Poland nor into Ukraine, is still not clear. So it's unclear, but NATO is likely going to Article 4, which would be before Article 5, and the question of whether we go to a all-out war. And what happens there. This, of course, is very tragic news, especially for the people that were killed in Poland. Our Swedish Prime Minister was out very late last night with releases of immediately after it was happening on the support to NATO and the support to Poland. And he had concluded a call with the Ukraine and Swedish commitment for the NATO mission. And as a result, we'll be sending more air defense systems to Ukraine. We will also be committing more munitions to the NATO event. And this comes at a time when we're seeing our inflation edge down last week, and that was primarily because of our electricity prices going down. We see reflexively the food sales in Sweden were down. Well, we're not down. The grocery sales went up 6.6, but that is mostly in line due to cost of goods. So it's not an actual increase in consumption, it's just an increase in price and lowered consumption. So Swedish consumers have been lowering their electricity consumption, and they've been lowering their food intake. So we'll see how the Swedish bank moves on the forthcoming rate hikes, if they happen, as they're tracking the inflation. But with England hitting a 11.1% in inflation today, it's hard to say that Europe is taming its inflation. So it's unclear there. But in the Swedish press, there's also an article about greenwashing and Swedish banks, although they're not financing oil, they are financing to the tune of something like 1.1 billion euros into Norway, into oil finding. And this is a result of the need for oil, and of course, this being a profitable investment for the banks, while they're also saying that they're ESG friendly. So either interpretations of the rules have to change, or the economies can slide off the cliff. Because while we've had this price hike in electricity and Europe has managed to refill its reserves, this has come at the cost of African nations, where they cannot afford the price and therefore cannot afford the power generation. So while the price stability was a key focus for the COP27 and the energy security was a key focus, it looks like Africa is not getting the same respect, or so to say. They're largely dependent on the green renewables. And we will get a new CEO in Vattenfall on the 1st of December, and that's Dag Svensson. He will be the new CEO. And Vattenfall, while in the past, has traveled to places like India to discuss build out of nuclear power. In Sweden, they seem to prefer the environmental. And so you come down to the economic reality of which do you go with, intermittent or nuclear? And it's very difficult to do both. In fact, it's almost impossible. So you have the result where you chase after the intermittent as opposed to the nuclear. Now, at the same time, it takes roughly the same amount of time, about 6 years, to get everything into place. But the power grid is far from secure. However, the coalition power in government here in Sweden did propose more for nuclear, and is today criticizing the previous government, saying that they shut down nuclear. And while they did shut down nuclear, it was the decision of Vattenfall to say that some of the plants were not economically viable. So we will see how this goes going forward and whether we actually commit to the nuclear. On the side of batteries, FREYR, which is a Norwegian company and very promising, announced over the weekend that they would be moving to build a giga plant, and that they've acquired land in Georgia, and this will be for 35 gigawatt hours in Georgia, and that goes along with Koch Industries in the United States and their build out of a power plant in Georgia. Now, in Sweden, we have Northvolt in Skelleftea, which is in the northern region, and they've had a abundant power supply, or better than down here in the south. So they are building more plants, or will have to build more plants. They currently have one plant up and running, and they're a supplier to companies like Volvo and Volkswagen for their electric batteries. But in order to build out their expansion, they'll have to expand. And so where that power will come from and where they will build is yet unclear, as it's not clear what the power grid structure would look like and if it could support their build out. So, and of course, that would mean an increase in jobs by about 20, 30,000 if it was done here in Sweden. But if they're not building in Sweden, that would be a disaster for our Swedish economy. And on that note, we see BYD is starting to sell cars in Sweden. They have their own electronic or electric battery manufacturer. They have their own company that does that. They also retain their chip company, and they will be selling into the Swedish market to compete head on head with Tesla and other companies like Polestar. So, but we still come down to the issue of the power grid. And our power grid ministry has said that they cannot promise more support on electricity prices. And that was a key component to the inflation coming down. So we'll see what happens there. And this power demand will only increase, and therefore increase the power prices if it's from electrical. So there's a real question there on how we develop, and whether we develop into the intermittent power supply or if we go with nuclear. We will keep an eye on the inflation figures as they are developing. And then, of course, the Swedish press also focused on the US politics and the announcement of Donald Trump into the presidential race, which means that he will no longer get support from the GOP Republican Party on his lawsuits. Now, that will be something like $1 million freed up in legal fees that he's already had to spend, or that they spent for his legal lawsuits. And he's come out with a softer tone, but I think what happens here is that, in my opinion, the Trump candidacy showed that voters will come out. If you look at the number of voters that came out for Biden in the last election cycle, it was a clear rejection or repudiation of Trump. And in this latest election cycle, many of his candidates did not do well. And in a state like Georgia, it would be interesting to see, because if he were to go into Georgia and campaign, Herschel Walker would probably lose. And Herschel Walker has in fact received less results than Warnock. So already you have a candidate that needs to continue to fight to get above water for the runoff that comes on December 6th. However, it would be a litmus test to see if Trump would go out and campaign for him. If he does campaign and Herschel Walker loses, then I think you have a clear indication of how the country would vote on Trump in 2024. And it's not clear whether it would be somebody like DeSantis and maybe somebody like Tulsi Gabbard going up against somebody like Michelle Obama and Gavin Newsom from California. But this is all speculation and really too far to be seen. But I think what's important for Swedish politicians is their adherence to delivering what their voters wanted. And so if you don't see that, you may see what you saw in Denmark and the flip back to the previous parties. So we're moving along. Our economy is in a shaky state. Our politics are not clear, and we are committed to NATO. And the markets are down right now in Sweden. But remember, there's always a way to make money in the market, and it's all how you want to play it. If you're short-term trading, long-term investing, if you're shorting. And so we'll wish you the best of luck and success in the markets. Thank you very much.